Kamala Harris just can't catch, not Kamala Harris on Saturday Night Live, but she can't, the vice president just can't catch a break in her attempt for a political comeback after a series of brutal stories that her office was a terrible place to work. Yet examples of her incompetence keep breaking. Example, the White House being forced to defend Harris's role as the so-called border czar after Guatemala's president claimed last week that he had had no contact with the vice president since last June when she made that awkward visit to the Guatemalan capital.
Then why is it that she has not spoken to the president of Guatemala since June? That's 6 months.
Well, I know that I did see this kind of strange report from the president of Guatemala saying that he has had no contact with the White House, which is inaccurate.
He didn't say the White House. He said Vice President Harris. He has not spoken to her. And if she's in charge, why is that?
If it's not her fault, whose fault is it, Megan?
It is her fault. Of course it's her fault. It's her job. She accepted it. Now she's trying to charge a electric car. That was a disaster. She's like one of the most inauthentic people in Washington, and that's saying something. I think that I want to talk, I just quickly mentioned that her staffer's leaving. I think for me that was the biggest tell, because you're willing to be miserable working for somebody if you think that the road leads to the top job. But they did a risk-reward calculation, and they cut bait because they saw that she was never going to go anywhere. And they weren't willing to put up with, well, garbage working in her office. That's my opinion. And I think that she's trying to distract by charging the electric car, but it shows the idiocy of Washington, because she proposed getting rid of all gasoline-powered cars by 2035 a few years ago, and she clearly doesn't really know how to charge an electric one.
Well, but Joe Biden is the boss. Joe Biden is unpopular. It's not Kamala's fault, is it?
Well, she hasn't helped herself, Geraldo. If you're going to go down and say you're going to fix root causes and then ghost the guy for 6 months, come on. I mean, they did the same thing with the crime thing. Remember, they're like, oh, yeah, we're in touch. We're sending all this federal help to these crime-ridden cities. And the sheriffs were like, we haven't heard anything from you guys. And then she scrambles to get something out and say, oh, actually, you know what? We got a bunch of companies together. We're sending down millions of dollars to Central America. She's bragging about how she's bribing Latin American countries. You think these countries are just going to not take all this money, keep it, and keep sending the caravans north?
I think that's what happened to her plan, the reality of Central and South America.
Right. It's like every day it seems like it's her first day on the job. It's so bad, Geraldo. Politico
How bad
is
is it,
writing
Jesse?
advice columns.
Yes,
this is an advice column. How Kamala is awesome. Nothing's her fault. But here's what she can do to get herself out of this rut. And then they interview 6 of the most highest paid political consultants to give her free advice.
Yep.
I mean, I don't remember this happening with Trump. You know, how Russia's investigation's not Trump's fault. What he can do to beat Mueller and win re-election. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But, you know, Greg, it is a tough job being second banana.
That's true. But whose fault is that? It's the Democratic Party, because there's so many examples of failures caused by just one variable decision making. Look at all of who she is. OK, she has a lack of charisma. She has a lack of depth. She has a lack of seriousness. Her primary showing was terrible. Her role of a prosecutor was questionable. So those are 5 variables. And if you were looking at them, you would have said, hell no, as a VP choice. However, none of those variables mattered. They looked at one, and that was identity. And that was the one variable she could pass, and it was the only variable that mattered. They needed to pair that identity with an old white male on his last legs. It's like pairing the right wine with a rubbery plate of bad chicken. So the problem is, whenever you make a decision
We've all been to that
based on,
banquet.
yes, exactly. This is a bad banquet. Any decision based on one variable will fail 100% of the time. They had all these variables in front of them that they could have seen that she was a disaster, but they chose one. She was a woman of color.
Did you read a book on variables?
No, I've learned that all from Scott Adams.
Oh, okay.
Am I an old brown man on his last legs?
Yes.
But, you know, Dana, I've always said it's her problem is lethargy and a lack of verve.
Well, here's the thing. So when Jen Psaki was asked that question, if she had been given permission by the president and the chief of staff, she could have said, it's a great question. I suggest you call the vice president's office and ask them.
That's cold.
And then, but that would force them to do it, because when she went to Guatemala in the first place, that was the photo op for the root causes tour. Then she doesn't do anything else, but now they're trying to fix her problem with photo ops and crowdsourcing political advice. Yeah. When it's going to take some time. Get some stuff done.
Is it possible?
No.
Okay, then.
When David says it's hopeless, it's hopeless. She wrote, and the good
Miss
news
Optimism.
And everything will be okay.
is, and everything will be okay. And now it's like, no, it's not.